Hey everyone, welcome to the Noor Podcast. We are a talk show style podcast based in Lot 14 in Adelaide, and we are just a storytelling platform where we want to uncover people's masks that they put on in daily life. Come listen to us as we delve down into the stories of everyday people and talk about the accomplishments that they've had in their life. Let me introduce you to today's guest.
Hi, my name is Maddie. I'm an Adelaide girl. I'm a dancer, choreographer and teacher. So in the podcast, we'll be talking about the industry in Australia and Adelaide with the dance world, a little bit about the Adelaide Fringe, and then talking about my experiences on a cruise ship. So if you wanted to know what it's like working on a cruise ship, come and listen along, and I hope you enjoy it.
Maybe we can just start with a bit of intro of who you are, and kind of the story of, you know, how far back we need to go to kind of get a big picture of, you know, what makes you now, what you do now. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, I am a performer, a dancer, and that's also taking me down the pathway of becoming a choreographer and a teacher as well, which I think is a pretty natural pathway that a lot of dancers take. So my whole childhood was dancing. After school, I would probably be there sometimes 13 hours a week, 5 days a week, lots of commitment. And I loved it. And I remember my parents jokingly saying, all right, you ready to quit yet? And I said, no, I'm going to do this forever. I'm not quitting.
Yeah.
And I literally think I probably will. So when I was finishing high school and deciding what I was going to do after school, I was looking at different uni courses and everything, and some of my friends who I'd grown up dancing with were applying for dance jobs and going straight into professional contracts. Some of them were applying for full-time courses, and so, you know, I was kind of seeing what was out there for me, and I only applied for one full-time course for a music theatre course, didn't get it, so I was a bit thrown back. And so I went straight to uni, but still had this dream of going and being a dancer. And after seeing what some of my friends had done, one of them did a cruise ship straight out of school. And so I started auditioning for cruise ships, and I got a job on a cruise line.
Wow.
And I actually finished my uni degree, which is quite funny that I have a degree in management in business.
Oh, wow.
And after I finished that, I went off to America and trained with the cruise ship company, and I did 3 contracts with them. And I also did a contract with Disneyland, and then COVID hit. And then I came back, and there was some work coming up with Fringe. So I started choreographing shows for local companies and slowly worked my way into different amateur theatre companies and performing companies within Adelaide to continue working and choreographing there. So that's kind of a brief summary of how I got to where I am.
Yeah, awesome. Let's break it down into a little bit from the start. You said that you always wanted to be a dancer. When did it stop being just like a hobby or something I'm good at to like, I could do this professionally? Like, when did you know, and like, how did you know that you would even make it?
Well,
you know,
you never know if you're going to make it.
Yeah.
But growing up, I always thought it was a realistic career path. Maybe I was delusional, but I just never grew out of thinking that. And so as a little girl, I would dream of being on stage and performing and having that sort of life. And as I got older, I noticed some of my friends who I grew up with, they had those dreams, and then they started to have other dreams. But I was just always so fixated on this, and it was so me, and I just loved it. And I wanted to work hard at it. I had that natural passion for it. And there was nothing else that really interested me to the same level as this. So it was my love, was my passion.
Can you, I mean, for someone that doesn't know, can you put it into perspective how common or uncommon it is to actually make it to be a professional dancer?
Okay, so I'm quite skewed. Someone was saying this to me this week, saying it's not very likely that someone will grow up doing their sport and then take it on as a career. However, because I'm in the industry, I feel like there's so many people who do it.
Yeah.
And it is a very small industry, so you kind of know everyone in Australia through one other person who does this sort of a job.
But like growing up and you saw the people that you were around that also wanted to do the same thing, I'm sure not everyone
No, definitely not everyone. It's really skewed because I come from a very elite dance school as well.
Yeah.
And so within my cohort, so the girls who graduated the same year level as me, there was about 4 or 5 who went on to do it professionally, which is pretty unheard of. So I was in quite a tight-knit cohort, which actually probably pushed us to all get to a really high level because there were so many of us. Some years out of that school, there might be no one who makes it or maybe one person. So, just luck of the draw. But definitely now that I'm on the other side and teaching, and there's so many that I teach who say that's what they want to do. And realistically, you go, okay, probably 1, 2, 3 have a good shot. So
do you tell them that? No. Yeah, of course not.
You don't tell them explicitly, but you just say, oh, what are you considering after school? What else are you considering? That sort of thing. Just keep their mind open to it, because if they want to do it, they probably do need to do it to go out into the world a bit further, to see how big the industry is, and then to go, oh, okay, maybe this is not as realistic as I thought. What other pathways do I have that still feed the same passion that I have for this industry?
Well, and going back to, like, you said you weren't part of an elite dance school, and you said like 4 to 5 people made it, right? What, like, looking back and reflecting, what were some of the differences you saw between people that made it and people that didn't? Was it just natural talent? Did everyone work just as hard as each other? Like, what goes into it? Definitely
not. There's a saying that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I'm a firm believer in that. Something I see in myself and in my students, and also the cohort that I grew up with, is you have to put in the hours when no one's watching. So when you're at home and you can say to your student, or your coach can say to you, you need to go home and do this every single day, or you need to do this 3 times a week. And it's only normally something small, but if you have the drive and the passion to do that habit over and over, just the small thing, that's what's going to make the difference. Because everyone can rock up to a class and give 100% when there's other people watching you, when there's a mentor or a coach saying, do this, push, that sort of thing. But it's when you're at home by yourself, and then it's your self-motivation. That's the drive that you need to make it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you, I mean, looking back at your own, pathway to getting where you are, and maybe there's someone in the audience that is there, in a dance school or really wanting to get into dance. What's something that you would give them as a piece of advice to say, something that really to help you stand out and give you the best odds of actually making it?
It sounds cliche, but you have to believe in yourself. You have to know what sets you apart and makes you different from the other people you're competing against, because they're also going to be really good. They're going to be amazing, and it will be so easy to pick out, wow, that girl can kick her legs really high. That person there is so eye-catching, the way they use their face, or whatever it is that sets them apart. And you also have some sort of superpower within you. And so it's going into a room when it counts, like an audition, or going into a mentally difficult space to dance or to perform or train, and going in there and going, no, I know what sets me apart, and using that as your drive, because it's so easy to fall back on, but her leg's higher than mine.
Right.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you get the job, because you've got something else that makes you your X factor.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's really good advice. Thank you for saying that. And so in terms of dance school, what does that actually look like? Like, obviously, everyone's been to normal school. They have, classes and you have subjects that you do. What is dance school?
That's true, but people who don't know. I
have no idea.
I know.
You just go and dance every day? Like, what do you have to learn?
It's similar to sports in training, I guess. There's often a structure. You start with either warm-ups, if it's ballet, that's at the bar, and then you get into the center and you might finish with a routine or something. There's certain conditioning classes that you might go to. It's always split into different genres. So I grew up training mainly in ballet, tap and jazz. They were the main genres that I did syllabus for. So that's where you train and you do exams and you go upper level. Kind of if you've done music like that, it goes up in a syllabus level. And then aside from that training, you do performance, and that could be in competitions or just preparing for a concert. And that's what prepares you for the stage and for a job.
Yeah. And obviously you do a lot of auditions. And I'm sure as you get into teaching as well, you've also sat on the other side of those auditions. There's a lot of people that you're going up against. what would you say, maybe it's something that you did, but also some advice that you could give? How do you stand out, like out of 100
You
people?
believe in yourself
Really?
again.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
And you can tell like that comes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
My first audition, I was hopeless.
Really?
My first audition, I think I was still 17 and I flew interstate and just for the day, like woke up at 5 a.m., flew interstate, did the first round of a cruise audition, which is literally kicking across the room or one turn, that sort of thing. And I got cut. And it's not because my technique wasn't there. My technique was at a really good level by the time I was that age, but it's because through my face, I showed that I doubted myself. And it's not that I doubted my technique, but I went into the room and I went, oh my gosh, there's all these dancers from Sydney. They're the real deal. I'm just a little Adelaide girl. And it made me dance differently.
Yeah.
Your dance is an expression. So you're going to express what you're feeling. So if you feel like you're doubting yourself, it's going to show.
That's so true.
obvious.
Yeah, wow.
And that's for anything. You go into an interview and you doubt yourself for a new job. If you don't know what sets you apart and what your X factor is, this is what I bring to the table, it's going to show.
Yeah, that's so true. And you said before just then, like you're just an Adelaide girl, right? And the real dancers in Sydney, like as in like that's the, there's a lot more people, there's a lot more markets, like the population's bigger. It means if only 1% make it, 1% in Sydney is like 3 times more people than in Adelaide, right? What does the market for dance look like? And maybe also, like you said, you just finished uni as well in business management, like from the business side of dance, obviously there's the creative side, but the other side of it, like what is the market for dance? Like how many dancers are there? Like, is it growing? Like, is the demand growing? Where does that side of things come in?
Yeah, well, it's always changing, especially with social media, especially from when I started. It's very social media. You've got to promote yourself and put yourself out there and post yourself dancing all the time. That's almost your business card nowadays, especially in Eastern states. It's a lot of who you know and a lot of networking. And I would say not every dancer who's at a professional level is performing all the time or booking all the jobs, and not because their skills aren't there, but it's just who you know. It's how you worked on a previous job and your work ethic and how you were behind the scenes and how kind you were. That's the kind of thing that makes people want to employ you again, because the nature of your work is always contract work. So it's just...
So there's no like permanent full-time position or anything. It's always just...
Look, permanent position, a cruise ship offers a permanent position. You can stay in that company for many years. So that's really attractive. Otherwise, you could be in a ballet company like the Australian Ballet, which for me is so out of my league.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah, right.
Yeah, you'd have to be ballet as your number one, which I'm a bit more versatile.
Oh, yeah.
Ballet is quite a strict training regime. And the other option is something like a contemporary company, which is also not mine. I'm a bit more jazz and theatre commercial.
Yeah, interesting. When you think about athletes, right, you talk about their age a lot, because obviously your craft is dependent on your physical body and your capabilities, and so in the term of dancing, when do people generally tend to peak at their like physical capability?
Yeah,
generally?
So it's interesting because dance gets compared to a sport a lot, but dance is also an art form. And an artist who's had more life experience is going to dance in a different, more mature way than someone who's younger who can do all the tricks. And so it depends what kind of job it is, what the specific choreographer or producer's looking for. When you're quite young, it's probably easier to go and book jobs that pay less or are new in the industry. So booking a ship first year out of your full-time course, something like that is actually a really wise choice. Go and get some experience under your belt, not just dance and performance, but life experience, because it's just going to help you as an artist. And I know lots of students that I train and lots of my friends, they're going towards the theatre world where you have to play a character as well, and you need life experience to put into your acting choices. And there's different roles and shows. I'll use Chicago as an example. That's coming to Adelaide really soon. But you're playing a murderer of your husband. You can't be 18 years old and have the maturity to play that role. So not every dance role is exclusively dance. It's crossed over with the artistry involved. And so your peak technical age is probably, you know, just under 30, like 25 to 30 if you didn't have an injury. Just as an athlete, look, I actually don't know what I'm talking about, but roughly from what I know of
there's obviously going to be like exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, because you want to keep honing your technique. And so even when you're 21, you might have all the tricks, but you're still developing maturity of technique. And then once you're an older dancer, you get to play more on the acting choices and the maturity. And you'll see a lot of Broadway dancers who are older.
Yeah,
because they bring the sophistication to their style and movement.
Yeah, that's so true. And you talked about injury there. Are all injuries like kind of recoverable at least? Like, can you always get back to your craft, or are there sometimes, have you even like stories of people that get injured doing it and then there can actually be some permanent damage? Like,
the thing is, a lot of dancers are okay with pain. I did one of my cruise ship contracts with a messed up back for the whole contract.
Oh, wow.
Because I would rather stay there in a bit of pain than come home and face that disappointment and then recover and then not finish the contract. So a lot of dancers do put up with pain, which is not always the best.
No, yeah. I mean, it's similar to sport in that way, right?
Yeah. The interesting thing is you get so much adrenaline from being on stage that you literally don't feel the pain until the next morning or until you're warming up.
Right.
I'm also, my body's still quite young.
Yeah.
I'm 28. It's not too old yet. I'm sure in the next few years I'll feel it.
Yeah.
But unless it is a really, really big injury, you can put up with pain. And so it comes up with, you know, your career is so short, so you're trying to get the most out of it. I do know people that push through their injuries, and then I know dancers who take time off and it's just whatever is most important to them.
You know, when you said that, this is not a question, but I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he was it's not professional, but he was in high school rowing in Adelaide, and he was at a very, very elite level. Like, I think his team got fourth or third in the country. Like, it was extremely high. But then he got injured and he couldn't play anymore. He couldn't perform anymore. And he saw a lot of therapists and, you know, tried to get his body back to it, but it wasn't working. But then I was talking to him and he was saying something really interesting where, and he was talking to one of his therapists, and it was more of a fit psychologist, that specifically specializes in high performance athletes after they get injured or anything like that.
Yes.
And the psychologist described something really interesting, which was that they realized that a lot of these high performing athletes, but I'm sure this also relates to something like dance, when you're no longer able to do the things that you used to do, and you think back at, wow, my body used to be able to do that, they actually oftentimes have to treat it like you've lost a loved one. Wow. And the psychologist treats the athlete or performer, as like a loss, and they have to kind of mourn their old identity. Because obviously when you commit so many hours of your life into that craft and you can no longer do it, you inadvertently put your identity in that. But yeah, it's an interesting thing what you said.
I had an injury right when I was in the middle of uni, and I think it really helped push me in the right direction. So I had sprained my ankle once in school playing netball, and then in uni I sprained it again, but I actually tore the ligament. So I was out for a bit longer. And I remember watching people dance in a routine that I should have been in if I wasn't injured. And it was a real moment for me, because I was sitting in the chair going, oh my gosh, what if right now is the best that I ever dance and I don't recover from this injury, and that's as far as I ever made it.
Yeah.
Which I was sitting in a chair in the audience watching, and it was like a panic attack, and it made me realize how much I actually wanted it. So it's almost like I knew if I lose it, the stakes are actually too high. I need to work hard on this. And so out of that, almost the fear of not making it, because I was so close at that stage, I was literally 1.5 years out from making my dream job.
Yeah.
That's after that injury, I definitely came back stronger.
Yeah.
And it's hard because injuries, they can often make or break someone. They can lose their confidence out of it. Or if you go through it with the right people and the right support group around you, it can definitely help accelerate you in the right direction.
That's so true.
Injuries can be helpful. We don't want them.
No.
But they can help.
And it's like that thing you said about maturing as a dancer, right?
Yeah.
I think your style changes and I guess your risk appetite goes lower as well. But yeah, anyway, it's interesting. It's an interesting side note. You did mention quite a bit that you were on a cruise ship working.
Yes.
You did 3 contracts.
Yes.
How was that experience? I mean, most of the audience would have never met someone that's worked on a cruise ship before.
Yes.
Can you tell me what it was like and maybe a story or something?
Yeah. So the slogan that I would say every day was, we're having the time of our lives.
Yeah.
Or I would say, guys, I'm going to tell my grandkids about this one day. This is amazing. And it's interesting. Some dancers see it as a stepping stone in their career. I was definitely someone who saw it as the whole experience and went, we're getting paid to travel the world. I'm just a little girl from Adelaide and I'm meeting all these people who live in New York and and I'm seeing the world. And yeah, it was a better education for me than uni was. It taught me so much about life.
Really?
Yeah. I was on a really prestigious cruise ship as well. I was on a big ship, and then I also did some smaller luxury liners. And it's so interesting. You go and have dinner and fine dine with these fancy people who have way too much money to spend on 1 week of a cruise ship. And you hear about their lives. They're all living in New York and California and really fancy things. And then you finish having dinner with them and you'd go and, I don't know, do your duty, host trivia, whatever, and then go to the crew bar, and I'd literally be chatting with the housekeeping staff over a beer, talking about their families back home and how they're working really hard and they're the superhero for their family back home. And for me, it was, I mean, not every dancer does that. They do their job, then they go home, they hang out with the dancers. But I was learning about so many different people from so many different places and just really seeing the human condition as a whole and what everyone is looking for and what everyone needs. And we're all the same. You can be super rich. You can be from the middle of Philippines and making a way for your family, but, you know, we're all the same.
Wow.
It's a cool experience.
Yeah, that is. It's interesting that you say that we are all the same.
Yeah.
What differentiates them then? Like, you said you chatted with all these wealthy people.
Yeah, it's just external things that make you different. So a cruise ship is not a country. It's this own unique world that is created and exists and floats in the middle of the ocean. And what's unique about a ship is there's no culture.
Yes.
So everyone has the same shared experiences, whether you are a guest paying for your travels or you are working on the ship and working hard long hour days. Everyone got off the ship and we're in Barbados and we're loving it. We're seeing the beautiful beaches. We can see all the tourist attractions, everything. And then we get back on the boat and the same experiences that I'm talking about with, oh, didn't you see that beautiful beach? Isn't that just stunning? Having conversation with people upstairs and then you go downstairs. Did you see that beautiful beach today? Yes, I did. I took a photo and sent it home to my family. Wow. Like, we're all just experiencing it the same. It doesn't matter how you got there.
Yeah, interesting.
So, yeah.
What was your scope of work? Like, what did your contract say? Because the thing that you're describing to me, you said you were a dancer, but then in the story you said, I was just about to host a trivia. Like, a dancer doesn't host a trivia. So can you help me explain what?
If you ever do a cruise ship contract as a dancer, I might be talking to the other people, not you here, Jim.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to. That's right.
You will always be doing many, many things outside of your actual dance role. And it's for many reasons. I think the more that you do other jobs around the ship, it helps you to connect with the other staff members. It helps you to connect with the guests, which helps the ratings for the entertainment department, but it also helps you enjoy the experience because the job of being on a cruise ship, you're not a dancer and then you go home. You're a dancer and then you're stuck on that ship.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to blend in with the culture of the ship, and lots of people are working really hard there. And lots of dancers have worked really hard to get there. But once you get there, it's cruisy days.
Yeah, right.
So, for example, you work hard your whole life. It's a very competitive industry. Then you get to Florida and you're rehearsing 6 days a week and 8 hours, and it is so full on. And that's when all the injuries happen. It's really full on. And then you get on the ship.
During rehearsals? Yeah, right, of course. Yeah.
And then for six months or whatever, you just do those shows and have a really great time. Yeah, injuries is an interesting one. I sometimes describe being on a ship as being like on a reality TV show.
Really?
We had one contract where we had over 10 people leave, a new person comes on because of injuries.
What?
It was ridiculous.
Wow. It's like when you have a TV show and a different cast member.
Who's going to leave the ship today? Who's the new person coming in?
Wow.
We stalked him on Instagram. Is he going to be nice? Yeah. It's like a reality TV show, and it's also condensed. You think about those shows, nothing exists outside the bubble of that show.
Yeah.
That's what it's like being on a ship.
Yeah.
You've got no internet really. You're just stuck on that bubble.
Yeah. Wow. And obviously being part of these cruise ships, I'm guessing you've been to a lot of different places in the world, and you probably ought to stay there as well. And you just met people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And we love asking this question because we love Adelaide here.
Yes.
And so how would you compare Adelaide to the rest of the world? I think you're so qualified to answer that.
Okay.
What is the pros and cons? Why are you still here? Because that's a quick question, right? Because you've seen everywhere.
When I came back the third time, I hated Adelaide.
Really?
And then sometimes I would come back and love it. It's weird. Just depends what's going on in your world and in your life. Lots of Americans or other travelers that I met who found out I was from Australia would say, oh, that's the world's best kept secret. People don't want to travel to Australia because it's too far away, but then you get there and it's just amazing. And I think the catchphrase that Aussies use saying, yeah, no worries, mate, that sums up Australia to a T about our approach to all things. Even just forgiving people, yeah, no worries, all good, no worries.
That's so true.
I don't know how to say it any better, but we're just very chill about even work. Hey, do you mind just printing this? Yeah, no worries. It's just easy.
That's so true. I never thought about that.
Sorry if you're from overseas and you're listening, but I'm not trying to bag you. But
no, we literally had someone come from the UK, moved here, and she was on the podcast, and she just trash talked the UK. It's you have no idea what you're missing out in Australia.
Yeah.
This is the place to be. Yeah.
And so Adelaide is it says the most livable city. It really is. I would tell people I live this close to the city. I live this many minutes from the beach. And they're like, whoa, that's amazing. And I said, no, everywhere's 20 minutes in Adelaide. I mean, I do think Adelaide is changing. It's turning into a bigger city, which part of me loves because when I was younger, I'd be like, the nightlife doesn't exist here. But even tonight we're walking in and Illuminate's happening and there's so many people walking around the city. So look, at the end of the day, my family's here. My sister just had a baby a couple of years ago, another one on the way. And as much as dance is my passion and my love, family is also super important to me. So I'm probably not running off traveling anymore. I'm setting up my networks here and contributing to the dance community in Adelaide.
Yes, and that's a great segue because what I was going to ask was the dance community in Adelaide, right? And we talked a little bit about market before. Can you, and how much harder is it to make it in Adelaide?
I don't think you can.
Really?
I genuinely
you think
don't.
You got lucky? That was an exception?
So you can't stay in Adelaide.
Oh, you
have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, right.
There is ADT, which is Australian Dance Theatre, which is a really heavy contemporary theatre that's in Norwood in Adelaide. But apart from that, there's not any regular work for a dancer here. So most dancers, if they're based in Adelaide, it's because they're working overseas or they are just based in Adelaide to teach so they can audition interstate, or Adelaide dancers will go and move interstate to make a name for themselves. Even with things like corporate gigs, little commercial things here on the side, little music videos, short weekly contracts or something, there's a lot more opportunities interstate. those opportunities still exist in Adelaide. I have definitely noticed since COVID that they've dropped off a lot. I was even asked to do just a simple roaming gig for Cirque du Soleil the other week when they opened here. And week before they said, hey, sorry, I know you had this date kept free to do a gig for us, but we've just had to cancel because there's not enough funding in Adelaide. The Eastern States gigs are still going ahead because there's more funding there.
Right.
So, I mean, look, speaking about COVID specifically with the Adelaide industry, there was a bunch of funds pumped into performing arts after COVID. So for 2 years, there were some really cool initiatives happening and going on. And you can notice that the funding has stopped and things have dropped off. On the other end, artists were all home in Adelaide during COVID. So even my friends off on ships, other side of the world, or people that had lived in London for years, they all came home. And so there was so much talent in Adelaide during that time. And there was a really cool initiative that started where all of us pro dancers would just come together and teach a class for each other.
Really?
And it was really cool. Yeah. And people that I danced and competed against 10 years ago were just all jamming in the same room, and it was not competitive. There were no jobs to be getting, so no one was competitive. It was just really fun and really cool to see how much there is in Adelaide and how much talent has come out of Adelaide. There's nothing to keep the talent here though, which is a bit sad because we've got Adelaide Fringe, we're the city of festivals. Is that what we are?
Yeah, we
the
are.
State of festivals or something. SA, the festival state.
Yes,
we've got Cabaret Festival.
Yes.
We've got a new music theatre course at the uni, which is only a couple of years old now, but even that is sort of changing the way that Adelaide is situated in the industry. I don't think change ever happens quickly in Adelaide for anything.
Yeah.
So I can see that it's shifted since 10 years ago when I was 18 and starting out in the dance world. But
I think that's a good thing. Like, I was talking to a friend about it yesterday, and he's an entrepreneur. He's like gone to a bunch of different places. He's gone to Melbourne to do business, and he's just traveled the world. And maybe you'll see the same thing here, but he was saying one of the big things he noticed was when you look at people in Adelaide and you just generally go out in public and see people's faces, they're smiling, they're happy, they're relaxed. Where in big cities, there's always pressure and stress and things are more expensive. So you got to work harder to maintain your own lifestyle. Like I was just talking to someone the other day in Sydney. She lives in this tiny ground floor, 2-bedroom unit. And it's like, it was like 1,500 a week or something, like insane. And for rent, right? And so like I think, we are just so lucky. But then he was saying that what sucks is that because everything is just slower here, if you want to start something, it doesn't matter how hard you work because you can't do something just by yourself. And as long as you need other people that you need to work with, no one's going to pace their whole lives up just to suit you. And so everyone is just kind of forced to slow down here. And it's both a blessing and a curse, right? Like, yes, things are slower here and things don't change quickly, but I think people are just happier. Quality of life, you know? And
I think some people never have the urge to leave Adelaide, and that's great. I don't think they should feel forced to, but I know there's other people that, and I was one of these, who think, oh, there's something inside of me that just wants to go and see and wants to go and see how big for me, the industry is, or see what it's like out there. I remember in high school, one of my friend's parents said, if you want to go overseas and do that, that's cool. But when you come back, you might realize just how good Adelaide is. And I think it's true because I wanted to go out and see everything and I got so much experience. And then because of that, so you come back and you see Adelaide different, because I think growing up here, I would complain a bit, oh, it's little old Adelaide. But now I'm like, yeah, it's cute Adelaide. Yeah. It's like, it's my secret, this amazing city that we get to be a part of.
Yeah. And there's just a culture of like, everyone wants what's best for you here. And everyone just wants to help you. And I think, because it's not malicious, like, no one's going to stab you in the back. I mean, maybe in your industry it's different.
No. They're kind. Especially Adelaide dancers. Yeah. There's not many. We all support each other.
Like even the thing that you said, like everyone coming together and doing dance class, like that's just an Adelaide thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're all just like in it together.
Yeah. And we were all different styles, like very different.
That's so
Whereas
good.
interstate, you have commercial dancers very separate to your theatre dancers, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas we're all versatile here because there's not many of us.
Yes.
We need to know how to do all the jobs.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the Fringe because that's something else you mentioned as well. And actually, well, going into that as well, you know, we talked a lot about you performing as a dancer, and now you say that you're also choreographing dance, and obviously there was a transition there. What have you learned about dancers, and like what's something that you kind of took and you learned about dance, even in general, from choreographing compared to when you were just dancing?
So prior to choreographing for these Fringe shows, my main choreography was for students and for competitions. So it's a really different outcome. And I think the biggest difference is choreographing for a show, you want to create characters and stories that the audience can connect to. They're not looking for your technique, which so many dancers think, I need to get this job for my technique. No, they're looking for the story and the character, which the artistry we talked about as well. And you can plan so much choreo at home. I really don't plan a lot because I know that what happens in the room, that's where the creativity happens, feeding off the energies and what does and doesn't work with the people in the room. And yeah, I think working with dancers, and often when I choreograph, the dancers are older than me as well.
Oh, really?
Is just the respect that they give to the choreographer. And it's so important as a dancer to just be moldable with your choreographer and say yes. And I think something that I'm very aware of is when I'm not the choreographer in a room and I am a dancer, my job is to be what they're asking and not to offer my opinion. And I remember when I first started out hearing people talk about this sort of thing and I didn't really understand it. But even though you might have the ability to be a choreographer, if you are hired as a dancer, that is your role. And the most helpful way that you can actually get the job done and get the product to where it needs to be is to just be a dancer and just be a chess piece that they can move around and a piece of clay that they can mold into what their vision is. It's a privilege to be a choreographer and someone says, hey, I want you to do this and here's the song and here's the costume and go. And really just that they trust me, that's the biggest thing. Like I was saying before, you have to believe in yourself, but when someone else believes in you and says, great, this is the criteria and whatever you want to do, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Amazing.
And that's such a privilege to have someone believe in you like that.
What about, I mean, obviously in acting, we talk about improv. Is that a thing for dance as well? Like,
I call it fluff. But if anyone's been in my choreo before, I'll say, yeah, da, 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 and then just 8 counts of fluff. And look, sometimes the fluff works. Sometimes the fluff needs to be guided, like we're doing sharp fluff.
Yeah.
Or it's not sharp fluff, it's sharp poses. And sometimes those moments are the best bits in the show.
Because character, right? Like
when you're just goofing around. The show we did this year was a Queen show and we were just being goofballs on stage. Like, I
love it.
Just pulling faces. And I mean, like, think about the Queen songs, Bicycle Race and Bohemian Rhapsody. It's just so silly. You have to be silly. And the fluff was the best stuff.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. My choreo was still good. But the fluff was great.
That's so good. And so obviously talking about the Fringe, it really does bring like life to Adelaide. But it, like you said, the biggest problem with it is that it's just once a year and it's in this 1 month, like Mad March, right? What do you think about that? Like the idea that, you know, Adelaide's the festival city, but it's so seasonal and so it doesn't sustain you to be able to do anything here full time compared to, and like what's different about, let's say, Melbourne or Sydney, where what's different there that you can actually sustain it full time, and what's unique about the Fringe in that way? Yeah,
well, Eastern cities, they're bigger. They have a bigger population. There's more people to buy tickets for the show, that sort of thing. Fringe is awesome in Adelaide. We also get people from Melbourne and from Perth flying around to come and perform. And I think it's really cool seeing the SA artists rise to the occasion. And, you know, you get your professional artists doing shows and also your amateur artists doing shows and getting people talking about the arts, and it's pretty cool to have a festival that is about the arts. However, SA being the festival state, it's not just the arts. We have, what's the food festival? Tasting Australia,
Yes.
that one. There's a writers' festival. I know nothing about it, but it exists. There's a guitar festival. The word festival is so broad. I'm sure that down the track, the performing arts will continue to grow in Adelaide. There's definitely people here that want it and that are interested.
Yeah, I was talking to a theatre fan recently, and she was like, she was looking it up. Every single major theatre that comes to Australia comes to Adelaide as well now.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't always the case, but
yeah, all of the music theatre shows, I'm a bit confused by it. They do Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide.
yeah,
We're on the map.
I know.
It's weird.
Exactly.
But then so that's the theatre shows, all the big artists like Harry Styles,
yes.
they skip Adelaide.
I know. But I mean, I kind of see it, like, because Adelaide is more of that mature, like if all the towns were a sister, like Adelaide's the older, mature sister.
Yeah.
You know? We're into the theatre, not the concerts.
When I was travelling, I always used to pull that card about Adelaide. Oh, we were the only city that was settled.
Yeah.
We weren't the convicts. We say plant.
Yeah.
I would pull that card.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, Fringe is good. Fringe is really good for
Yeah. We were talking about how, with the previous guest, how obviously the Fringe originally started with people just being able to buy tickets for the cost of lunch and just go see shows. And it was just, there was more artists and just kind of freedom of the arts just to be able to showcase that. Whereas now we're obviously going more into the business side, and there's a bit of profiteering from there as well. How does the economics look like from actually being behind the scenes at a Fringe show? Like, is it sustainable to just do a show every year?
It's a lot of risk. As a choreographer, I'm contracted into the show, so my risk is not as great. I know Adelaide artists that will make a loss, and then the next year they'll break even, then they'll make another loss, and the next year it's a profit. And so artists rely heavily on the grants, which is really great that there's lots available. And if you want to do a Fringe show, I would recommend looking at grants just as a safety net. When you put on a show, your risk is not, okay, this is the profit that I'd like to make. It's, this is the maximum amount I'm willing to lose for this to set it up. Doing your show 1 year at Fringe and having a loss, though, is not necessarily a bad thing if you see longevity with the show. Because the first year that you workshop a show, you're investing more hours into rehearsal, you're buying all the props, you're buying all the costumes. Once you've got all of that done and you present it the next year, your costs are actually a lot less. You're just paying for a couple of rehearsals and then hiring the theatre out. So even if you make a loss the first year, doesn't mean it's every year.
That's so true. So
tough industry. Yeah.
It sounds like it, yeah. But obviously that risk comes with, I see why the grants are so important, because it genuinely makes Adelaide like the Fringe, right? Like it's such a big part of who our identity is as a city.
True. And
I think it's at some point, like, it's the responsibility of the state to keep that going, and people shouldn't have to take all that risk on themselves. But it's good that we do that and that program does exist. So we talked a little bit, and I was kind of going off the back of that intro that you said at the start. And we've reached the end of that intro. That's what you do now. And so kind of, you've obviously been a dancer. Now you're teaching dance as well. What do you look forward to in the future at all?
I think you meant in the day-to-day life. I literally love my job. Whatever my job looks like, it's many different jobs in a day. But whatever mood I'm in, I always leave in a better mood after dancing, after teaching, after being in the room. This is the first year that I have actually been a full freelancer. Most of my work is freelance work now, which has been really rewarding. Some days I think, oh my gosh, I'm not like working at all today. And then other days I'm like, I'm so flat out. And it comes in seasons and ebbs and flows. I actually met with both Fringe producers that I work for this week. And grants,
for next year?
Yeah. Grants are coming up soon, booking in the venues. So there's exciting stuff for Fringe next year. And they're crazy people. I love them, but they're like, let's go even bigger next year.
Oh, wow, right.
So it's pretty cool. They're very inspiring girls to be around. I also have a wedding dance business where I go into people's houses and teach them wedding dance, and
that must be very rewarding.
I love it. I meet new people. Most of them, it's their first time ever dancing, apart from footsteps. Everyone goes, this reminds me of footsteps. And so that's amazing. I get to share my passion and just give them some quick tips. And what I love most about it is seeing people find their confidence with something that they thought was impossible. And I give them a few tips and they go, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this. Yeah. Literally my husband when I was teaching our wedding dance. And so that's really good. And I'm in a bunch of different schools as well at the moment. And we're about to start a new term, and I've got some new schools that I've never worked with before. So getting involved with those programs and
Usually when people say freelance, they like it's kind of saying, I don't have a lot going on, but it sounds like you're very busy.
It's weird though. My concept of being busy is so skewed. Yeah. If I showed you my calendar, it actually is quite busy, but maybe because I enjoy it so much.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, a huge thanks for coming on and having a chat about kind of dance and the performing arts. We haven't had anyone like that on. Before we finish off, I'd like to ask our last question, which is, I'll ask the question, which is, who's a local role model to you? And the reason behind that question, I'll let you think about it, is that, again, we host this podcast, right? Because we want to show, and we just bring everyday, ordinary people on that do extraordinary things and share their stories, right? And we live in a world where social media is always on our phones. We're always comparing ourselves to the people around us, people on the internet. We have a world stage on our phone. We always see the best of the best, and it can be kind of depressing sometimes. But we really want to encourage people that the people that are around you in your life are so important, and there's so much you can learn from them. So I want to ask you, who's someone in your life that you've learned a lot from and that you'd like to thank a little bit?
Cool. Yeah. I think just at the front of my head, because I was chatting with her this week and we were just talking about Fringe, is my Fringe producer, Renee. She was the first producer that asked me to come and choreograph the show for her. And prior to this, she had never produced a show. Yeah. And she was telling me these big ideas. And I was sitting there thinking, you're crazy, but I'll be a part of this. This sounds really fun. And just seeing how hard she works and how passionate she is, the amount she's willing to sacrifice for her art form. She will admit when she's terrified, and she'll say, I'm so terrified for this, or she'll say, this isn't working. And she's just so honest, which is amazing. And she's currently touring as company manager with the Australian Ballet. So she's doing amazing things, and she's the person that inspires me.
Yeah, amazing. All right, well, a huge thanks for coming on again. I hope the audience really enjoys the episode, because I really enjoyed talking to you. I learned a lot, because this is not every day you meet someone like you. So thank you.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Love chatting to you.